Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Eight Principles Voices podcast, hosted by Larry Johnson, your host, founder of the Eight Principles. And I'm delighted to have with me today a gentleman by the name of Sam Porritt. And as you know, my listeners know that one of the kinds of stories and guests that I really like to work with are people who've experienced whatever they're working with, which are the most ardent evangelists because they know firsthand everything about it. And Sam certainly fits that. He's the founder of the Falling Forward Foundation. I've often, he can tell you what that means, but he's the guy that is the comeback kid for sure. Those of you who are old enough may even remember that film, but that's another issue altogether. But welcome, Sam.
Larry, thank you. It's a pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and your audience.
So tell us, I guess, falling forward, before we get into your personal story, which is, of course, the heart of what we're going to be talking about, where did that name come from?
Well, yeah, it's a little hard to explain the name of the organization without also getting into my personal story, because falling forward is what I did, that led me to start the organization called Falling Forward.
Okay.
Um, and if you don't mind, I'll just kind of segue there. So in 2011, so 13 years ago, my wife and I were on vacation in Italy, having a truly a dream vacation. We were traveling with another couple, and we were staying in this beautiful home in the Tuscan countryside. And while in the midst of this idyllic vacation, I was taking early one morning. So I'm an early riser, and I get up early in the morning, and I'm out on the veranda by myself, enjoying a cup of coffee. And it's early morning, and the birds are starting to chirp, and the sun is just starting to, the sky is just starting to have a little color in it, and the sun is rising. And I start taking photographs because I'm in this beautiful place and I want to capture it. And so out I whip my phone, like, we all have our phones with us. I get my phone out and I start taking photographs. And I'm so wrapped up in the moment and taking these photographs of this beautiful sunrise, that I'm witnessing in Tuscany, that I lose track of where my feet are. And I lose my balance and I fall off a 15-foot wall.
15 feet.
So,
It's a full
yes,
story, Sam.
yeah. So I went from this moment of pure bliss and joy and, in the midst of this beautiful vacation to, I was briefly unconscious, but we're not sure how long. But when I came to, I am kind of like giving myself a pat down, and I'm trying to figure out, like, what did I do? What did I hurt? Did I break anything? And I get kind of halfway down my body, my pat down, and from my belly button down, I can feel nothing and I can move nothing, right? So I had a spinal cord injury, right? So I fall off this 15-foot wall, hit hard, initially briefly unconscious, and then, the realization of I'm paralyzed from belly button down.
Did you hit
So
earth, asphalt, stone? What did you hit?
um a combination of stone and grass. There was a like a landscaped walkway with stones, and I landed down there. And and to this day, we're not exactly sure how I landed, but the doctors think I probably landed on my feet because of the way it sent it like a shockwave up my spine and made one of the vertebrae in my spine, collapse, explode, and, cause the spinal cord injury. So, the point of it, it's very dramatic because I was on vacation in Italy and in the midst of this beautiful vacation, and then tragedy struck. But the point of it is accidents like that happen every day to many, many people.
They do.
And I, background wise, now that your your listeners have, got kind of what happened to me, background on me, I was 48 years old at the time, had had a career in advertising and corporate marketing, worked with a bunch of big companies on big brands. I had this very successful career, a really nice life, and everything changed literally in the blink of an eye, right? That you have an accident or an injury like that, and literally you don't know what your future is from that moment forward. And
You
uh,
know,
medical personnel came and put me in a helicopter, and the helicopter lifts off the ground. And I remember thinking to myself, I have no idea where I'm going. I'm in a foreign country. I have no idea where I'm going. My future, right, is completely in the hands of somebody else at this point, or many somebody else's, right? Higher powers as well as medical people who are going to, hopefully take care of me. So that's the drama, right? So now to fast forward just a hair, I had a great surgery in Italy, um, but really what my body needed after surgery was I needed a whole lot of rehabilitation,
yeah,
physical therapy, right? Essentially to see if I would ever be able to move my limbs again and ever walk again and ever, function again, kind of in what we all would consider normal function. And when we left Italy, the surgeon who did my surgery, his words to me were, "We don't know if you'll ever walk again, but, you know, get back to America, and as fast as you can, get going in rehab." He says, "You need a lot of rehab and, wish you all the best," kind of thing. And we got back to the US, and I went directly into a hospital, back here in the US, and they immediately kind of confirmed the same thing. They said, "You don't need any more surgery, you just need a lot of rehab and to see if your body will ever, recover and function again." So thus began this journey, this long journey in rehab, which I knew nothing about, right? Like most people don't, right? Until you or a loved one or a friend or a neighbor, has gone through something like that, you really don't know. And I never had a friend or a neighbor or a loved one who had gone through a lot of rehab. And in hindsight, probably very fortunate, right? That you know these things do happen to many people every day, and to not have experienced it, in many ways, it shows how fortunate my prior life was.
truly
But
blessed.
anyway, yeah, blessed, exactly right, right. But then I begin this rehab journey, and I'm in a wheelchair, and I'm going daily for physical therapy. And after 6 weeks of inpatient rehab, I had made good progress for the injury that I'd had. But then they discharged me from inpatient rehab in a hospital to outpatient rehab, and still had a long way to go. And even when I was discharged from inpatient to outpatient, I was still using a wheelchair at that point. And I'm my wife and I are at the facility where I'm going to do my outpatient rehab, and the lady is checking our insurance. And this is now the story of what led me to start the organization called Falling Forward. The lady is checking our health insurance, and she keeps typing on her keyboard and looking at her screen, kind of puzzled. And then she types some more and looks at her screen, kind of puzzled. And I'm across the desk watching her and reading her, and I'm like, uh-oh, that
This doesn't look
look
good.
doesn't look good, right? Her puzzled look on her face. And she finally speaks up and she says something to the effect of, "You have a very unique insurance policy." And I hear those words, and I told you this story, Larry, when we talked once before. I heard those words and I couldn't, bite my tongue. And, what came out of my mouth was, "Oh crap," right? Like, that can't be good, right? Like, And she goes, "Oh, no, no, no. Actually, it is very good." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And she goes, "Well, your policy has no limit on rehab." And I'm the one with the puzzled look on my face. And I said, "What do you mean limit on rehab?" And she goes, "Oh yeah, everybody's policy has a limit on rehab, but yours has no limit. It says here you're gonna get all the rehab you need to recover." And she's, just like flabbergasted, amazed at this unique insurance policy that we have. And it's not making any sense to me, right? Because the business person in me, or maybe you could even say the cheapskate in me, is thinking, I've paid those premiums for years and years and years. In the event that something bad does happen, I've paid all those premiums, so they take care of me. So I'm like, they better take care of me. I've paid all that money, right? And I'm, kind of thinking to myself, isn't that the concept of insurance? Of, it's there when something horrible happens to take care
Right.
of you, whether it's your house burns down or you crash your car or whatever it is, right? That it's there to make things right. So the concept of these limits on rehab in insurance didn't make any sense to me. But on the other hand, I wasn't going to argue with her because she's telling me it's good news for me, right? So now I continue my rehab, and literally for months and months and months, I'm going to physical therapy daily and very, very, very slowly making progress. Like, recovery from a brain injury or a stroke or a spinal cord injury, those things, recovery doesn't happen quickly. It's a really slow process. There were weeks where I couldn't tell, or my therapist couldn't tell if, I was really any better or not, right? Like, it's a slow rebuild process. But in my case, I did rebuild, right? And it was slow, but I had insurance that wasn't stopping me. And I kept going and I kept going and I kept working and I kept working. And I gradually, and I tell my story sometimes to audiences, and with the benefit of PowerPoint, I can put pictures up and kind of show, I went from this to this to this, right? I went from the wheelchair to a walker to crutches to a cane. I made, this slow progression in my body recovering. That's the good news, right? The bad news is, at the very same time that I'm at the rehab center going through my recovery, I'm surrounded by people who've all had really bad things happen to them as well, right? So the people at the rehab center where I was going, everybody had injuries as bad as mine, right? They all had brain injuries or strokes or spinal cord injuries, many in wheelchairs, many unable to walk or able to talk, or,
Hmm.
bathe or clothe themselves, or, anything, right? And I'm the one going to rehab with no stop, no limits. And I keep getting better and better. But I look around at all my fellow patients, and one by one, their rehab is ending. On Friday, it was Joe's last day coming to rehab. And next Friday, it's somebody else's last day coming, because one by one, their insurance was running out. And mine wasn't, because we had this unique, crazy, unknown why, insurance policy that had no limit.
Certainly atypical.
So very atypical. Yeah, very atypical. So my reaction, and I believe I told you this before, Larry, but for your audience to understand, my reaction to that scenario of, I'm here recovering. I have a chance, I got this gift. And meanwhile, I look around and all the people around me, they don't get the gift, right? And one by one, their rehab is ending. My reaction to that initially was guilt. I felt incredibly guilty. I didn't want my fellow patients to know how long I had been coming. I didn't want my fellow patients to know that I had this unique insurance policy that let me keep going where they don't get to keep going, right? I felt guilt about it. Over time, that guilt turned into anger. I was like, this makes no sense. Why, we live in America, this country with all these riches, and why is this happening? Why are people being cut off? And it really made no sense to me because it was clear that rehab works, right? That if you keep going, you do get function back. You can walk again, or you can talk again, or it may not be 100%, right? But 50 or 60 or 70% is better than
Oh,
20%,
absolutely.
right? Right. So it made no rational sense to me. So I went from the guilt to the anger phase, and I was angry for a while, and I'm like, this is really messed up, you know. And then somewhere I had an epiphany finally. And the epiphany was, don't be angry about it, do something about it, right? Like,
There you go.
and that's the starting of falling forward. So I, to summarize it, simplify it all, I had my injury in August of 2011, and I went through 2 years of rehab,
So,
until August of 2013. And that's at the 2 year mark when I was completing my personal rehab. On the 2 year anniversary of my injury is when we launched Falling Forward to, help other people have the same chance. And the idea behind Falling Forward, really very simple, was there's this barrier that's holding a lot of people back from getting the rehab they need and thus recovering. And we're going to eliminate that barrier, just like happened from was the case for me.
so
I had a chance to recover, and we said, let's give other people the chance to recover too, and whatever that means.
so
Everybody's recovery is different, but whatever it means, give them the chance to, you know,
hmm, do what they can do.
make the best of it. Right.
So how far along in your therapy did you have this sort of, oh, I know what I'm going to do about this? How far? I mean, how
Mm.
far into were you in it? A year, year and a half, 6 weeks?
Oh, yeah, good question. Larry, it was easily a year. Um, right, because the first year was, my head was, very much about me, and I needed to focus on me and getting myself as strong as I could be. But I reached a point, I wasn't done yet with my rehab, but I reached a point where I could see, all right, this is really working. I can see a positive trajectory for me. I'm going to come out okay. And then I started to think about other people and go, and that's when I went through the kind of phases that I talked to you about, the anger phase and ultimately the epiphany of, I want to do something about this. So,
Okay. So you're just about back. I mean, almost 100%. All right. That's pretty incredible in itself. All right. You had to be, I suspect you had to be in pretty good physical condition and good health prior to your accident to be able to do that.
I,
Uh,
I was, I've never been, what I would call really like a competitive athlete. But I've always been in good shape.
Good shape.
Um,
Well, and is
and,
that's what people tell me is Sam, you don't have to be Arnold, just be in good shape. You know,
right, right,
so
right.
many people aren't.
So at the age of 48, I for a 48-year-old man, I was in good shape.
Okay.
I didn't have, I wasn't overweight or anything. And my therapist said, right, those will all work to your advantage, right? If I were very overweight, right, then it's all that harder for your body to try to function and be strong and recover. So,
Well, and on top of that, if
um, yeah,
you've been overweight for a time, you'd already stressed your body a great deal,
right,
having
right,
extra
right,
weight. Uh,
right,
so then
right.
you get to the point you're just about you're there, you're ready to go, and you say, "This is what I want to do." So, what was your first step? I mean,
Yeah.
filling out the forms, calling your attorney, calling your best bud, and say, "I want you to be on my board." What was the first thing you did?
Yeah, good question. And I'm not sure I even can recall truly the first thing that I did, but I'm going to put it kind of in a nutshell. Launching Falling Forward, in my mind, was relatively easy to launch it. I came from a marketing background. I was used to, I'd worked on many launches over the course of my career, new products that we launched in market and that kind of thing. So, not that it's the same by any means, right? Starting a nonprofit is not the same as launching a grocery product or a hair care product or something, um, but the process of putting the pieces together, if you will, of launching the organization wasn't as challenging as the reality of operating it day to day, right?
Mm.
And operating day to day for any nonprofit, a big focus is fundraising, right? And I had never been a fundraiser before. Now, people say to me, okay, even though you weren't a fundraiser, your marketing background helps you with fundraising because you know how to tell stories. And that is true, right? That marketing in many ways is, telling a story to a customer, right, about a product to get them interested in the product. And in this case, I'm telling a story about what Falling Forward does, right, to interest donors to donate to
Well,
it.
and
So,
you're the person to have some authenticity there. You're not coming there
right.
as a as a as a paid celebrity spokesman. You know all about that. Here he comes.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And so, I mean, you said this at the kind of the start of the podcast that, I lived it. It's my personal story that led to founding the organization, and my personal story is proof that it works, right? That I can sit down with a donor who, doesn't understand rehab, but I can show them pictures of what happened to me, and they can see me now and go, yeah, it worked. You recovered. And I can show pictures of other people, that we have helped through their recovery process. So the storytelling piece, but I think back to your question, actually launching, kind of putting the pieces together to start the organization, there's many steps, right? You named them, right? You have to get bylaws drafted. I engaged an attorney who had experience in that, that could help me with drafting the bylaws and filing for incorporation and then filing the 501(c)(3), and all those steps that you got to go through, right? And then building a website and yada 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 to prepare for the launch, and recruiting a board, members of a board, and so yeah, there's multiple pieces that went through to actually launch the organization. But I think the greater challenge is keeping nonprofits going, and we've been around now for over 10 years. It'll be 11 years this coming August. And when we reached the 2-year point, I was thrilled that we were still, kicking, right? That we were still in business. When we reached the 5-year point, I'm like, okay, whew, we've made it, right? And then we reached the 10-year point. And, so there's longevity to what we're doing. We built a business model that has worked. So
So tell us about your current fundraising efforts. How do you generate funds at this point?
yeah, so yeah, and if I could, I actually want to back up because one thing maybe will help your audience understand what we do or how we do it. Um, when I was, in that launch process and looking at, this issue of the therapy caps and um, where does a difference need to be made? It was clear to me the issue is money, right? That the insurance companies are not going to pay for it, right? The money is being shut off there. So there's a need for money to pay for people's rehab, right? The issue is not that there's a need for more rehab centers, right? I had no interest in like opening another rehab center and putting my name on the door, whatever, right? Like
The care is available. It's the access.
the that's exactly it. And that's why I wanted to make this point. You nailed it. There's plenty of care out there and really good care and therapists who are outstanding, right? There's no need to reinvent that wheel, right? Where the issue is who's going to pay for it, whether it's the insurance companies or, in our case, a nonprofit. So, so because of that, Larry, what I want to point out is in building the business model, we said align with really good rehab centers, right? Like there's no need to open a new one, just align with the really good ones out there. And we've partnered with 4 really outstanding rehab centers. They do the work. We bring them the money to do the work, right? We bring them the money that keeps people going in their therapy after the insurance stops paying. So now to your question about how we fundraise. The first several years were very much through my network and networks of my board members, right? All about individual going after individual donors, and whether those be, $100 donors or 10, 20, $50,000 donors, right? You know, we went after kind of any and all. And individual fundraising has been the bulk of our fundraising. In the past year, we've also started going after grants, and we're currently in line for, and we think have, strong prospects for a couple significant grants. And we've known for some time that grant money is out there, but we haven't had the manpower or the time to go after it, if you will. And we're an all volunteer organization, and there's good and bad in that, right? We're proud that we have no paid staff. We're proud that that means the money we raise, all of it goes to, paying for people's rehab. And our donors are thrilled, right? Many of our donors say, hey, one of the key things that I think is cool about donating to Falling Forward is every dollar I give goes to pay for somebody's rehab, right? But the flip side of being an all volunteer organization and no paid staff is, less manpower means, you can't go after grants when there's grant sitting out
Well,
there or
and not only
yeah.
that, but even with individual fundraising, it will limit your capacity.
Sure,
Uh,
absolutely.
I mean,
Right, right.
you can be responsible in your overhead, and you can be irresponsible. You can be innovative, or that's what the English say. I love that, innovative, or and trailblazing that way, so that you're making the most for what you're spending. But I would, I know when I first interviewed you, I'm thinking the potential on this is huge. And, having the system to back you up to create that. You're the poster boy, you're the face. You have an excellent story to tell. So, we've had this
Thanks.
conversation before.
Yeah.
And I think with the proper kind of, infrastructure in place, you could really do some great work. Do you want to grow this? Are you happy where it is, or?
No, we very much want to grow it, and I think I told you, Larry. Yes, we are only with the money we're raising, we're only able to help, a fraction of the people who really need the help.
Mhm.
And every day, right? Every day there's another car accident or thousands of car accidents, people falling off ladders, people slipping on their bathroom floors, people having strokes, all the myriad ways that people have brain injuries and spinal cord injuries and strokes and everything, right? And so we're only able to help a tiny number of those. So answer your question is yes, absolutely. We want to grow because we want to be able to help more people, right? But I also say really openly to any audience I speak to, the ultimate goal is to shut falling forward down. And people go, what? And I say, because that will mean the issue has been resolved, right? That these therapy caps, and not to bore your audience with too much history, but the gist of it is the therapy caps started in 1997. Prior to 1997, there was no such thing. There was no limit on rehab, and people got the rehab they needed prior to 1997. They first started in Medicare. It was a new provision in Medicare. And then once Medicare did it, virtually all of the commercial insurance companies followed. And, not to be too, pointed, but it was a bonanza for the insurance companies because it limited their liability, right? As soon as they put a cap in, and their liability is limited. So
But then you told me that Medicare now has reversed its position.
indeed, and that's work that we were a part of and are really proud of. And so back to what I said, a moment ago about the ultimate goal is to shut falling forward down. To do that, we have to make this issue go away. Advocacy work, we believe, is, key to our strategy. So we have a dual strategy, really, to answer your question, right? Short term, we want to raise as much money as we can to help as many people as we can. But truth be told, we don't think a nonprofit organization should ultimately have to pay for people's rehab. We think the burden should go back to the insurance companies where it was prior to 1997.
Okay.
So
So
the
it's a
advocacy work,
prong. It's a two-prong case
it's
here.
a two-prong, yeah, it's a two-prong strategy. And every day, um, some of my day is spent on one side of that strategy and some is spent on the other side.
Okay.
Um,
Now,
but,
one thing you
but
said
the,
that I want to bring to the audience's attention
please.
is the way you go about administering the grants. Because I know they're probably thinking, oh, no, what do they just write checks to people? They draw the names out of a hat. People call them up. How does this work? Well,
Yeah.
as you explained to me, you partnered with a series of very impressive centers, and then you allow the medical directors at those centers to make strategic decisions based on the likelihood of recovery and to employ your grants, correct?
That's exactly right. And so kind of back to when I was first putting, the pieces together to start falling forward. I mentioned earlier, that I didn't think that there was a need to start a new rehab center, so let's just partner with the best. Well, the other key thing I had in my head is I want nothing to do with making the choices of which people benefit from the money, which people, get continued rehab and which people won't, right? I wanted nothing to do with that because I thought I have no qualifications for it, right? I'm a marketing and advertising guy by background. That's what I know. And it's a medical decision. So we put that decision in the hands of the medical professionals, as you said, at each one of the rehab centers. And it's worked beautifully, right? We started that from day one, and 10 plus years later, it's worked beautifully. And it's worked beautifully because they know the patients best, right? They're on the ground, they're at the rehab center, and they know the patients best. And they can say, this man needs 10 more sessions. This lady needs 20 more sessions. This person needs 40 more sessions, right? It's a medical decision. just like writing a prescription for, a medication or something. So we leave that decision to them.
See, that's, I think the way you put this together is really clever and very strategic. And now you're looking at it in both directions. If someone would want to invest in you
Yes.
or reach out to you for
Yes.
either of these, where would they go?
Yeah, so the very best source to learn more and or to contact us is our website, and the website is easy to remember. It's just the name of the organization, fallingforward.org. And on the website, you can definitely learn more. We have a whole page of, for example, we have a whole page of videos of people who we've helped, and some pretty dramatic stories. My story started this, but now we have dozens of others, hundreds of others that show, what is actually possible if people get the rehab that they need. And some of the videos on the website, show that. And then we're also on social media. So anybody in your audience that is active on social media, we are on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, and regularly make posts, updates on patients telling their stories, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But the website is the best place for people to start. Again, fallingforward.org. All of our contact information is there: email address, phone number, etc.
Well,
So
I would expect nothing less out of you, Sam, because you're a marketer. And I want to bring our audience some attention.
yeah,
I
yeah,
worked with nonprofits for a long, long time.
yeah,
And of course, I worked for one of the consulting firms. And one of the things they drilled into us was making it easy for people to access the organization. And so in the old days, when it was all printed pretty much, every single printed piece had to have complete information on contact information on the footer or somewhere on the thing.
yeah.
And I'm amazed even today, where you go onto a nonprofit website and you're like wandering around and there, well, how the hell did I find these people? That basic thing, you
Yeah,
see. And of course,
yeah,
you as a marketer, that's got to be there. It's got to be
yeah,
easy to find. It's got
yeah,
to be simple. Because
yeah.
people get, well, people have less patience now than they did when we first started. And
That's right.
so, see, there are advantages to being a marketer, Sam.
No, there are. And I take all the emails and all the phone calls myself, and I am happy to talk with people and answer questions, and you know it, really tell them whatever they want to hear to learn more. It's a complicated issue, right? As the marketer here, um, what I have found is, because very few people have ever heard of this issue before, this therapy cap issue, and I hadn't, right?
Well, unless
40,
you've experienced it, chances are you don't
right,
know.
right. But I lived 48 years. I'd never heard of this before, until I have this injury and I'm, enrolled in rehab. So this is a complicated issue, right? It isn't easy to explain to people what we do, right? But if you're a cancer charity or a animal rescue charity or a what food bank charity, or there's so many out there, right, that instantly people know what they are and what they do. We're different, right? We're this issue that most people haven't heard of before. It takes a while to kind of understand the issue, the impact of the issue, and as a potential donor, the impact that a donor can have, right? That literally your donation will go to pay for somebody's rehab, in the coming months, who otherwise their rehab would stop
Dude,
and they would be sent home. And for the rest of their lives, they would have disabilities that could have been corrected if they had the chance to keep their rehab going.
You see
So for a
that's
donor, right? Yeah,
that is a very straightforward case, Sam. I
yeah,
think the
yeah.
challenge that your organization has, and I don't think it's as big as you think it is. I'm going to, and that is helping people become aware of it because it's
Yes.
simple to understand.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. It's a matter of access, and or it's the lost land of the full pays. There aren't too many
Hmm.
people out there
Hmm.
who can do
Hmm.
that. Um,
Hmm.
I worked for a corporation once, Westinghouse, big corporation, and I'd learned that's where I learned the concept of being self-insured. Uh, the corporation had I think they had Blue Cross to manage all their plans, but all they did was take money out of the company to pay. It was not nothing was coming out of Blue Cross's coffers. It was what they
That's
call
right.
self-insured,
That's
and
right.
there aren't too many entities who can afford that. And so that's what you're doing. You're
Right.
restoring that to people.
Right.
Um,
Right.
you know,
Right.
thank you for doing this. And we may come back. I don't think I'm finished with you. I want to have a success story next time. But so I want to thank you for
Would
taking
love
your
to.
time today.
Yeah. No, Larry, thank you. This is a great opportunity to get the word out, and I'm sure the majority of your audience has never heard of this before, and I'm delighted to have the chance to tell them about it and to start the conversation. So,
Well, they will now. Uh,
yes, yes.
Everyone, thank you for tuning in today. I've had a delightful conversation with Sam Porritt, who is truly the man with a mission that personally affected him. I just love stories like this because there's success stories, and I really do. So, in the next we'll have another episode soon with somebody else. And until then, have a good day.
Thank you, Larry.